I wanted to make a video about our society and draw some comparisons to our own bodies to try to explain what happens when we choose to disobey God, and when we choose to do so on a collective level, when we all eventually go against the commandments of God. Our bodies and our societies are very, very similar. They are extremely similar. In our bodies, each cell has a specific function. It does a job. And when a cell stops doing its job, when it never grows up, when it never matures, when all it does is consume resources, we have a word for that. It's called cancer. Okay? So basically, the cell is no longer productive, and all it does is replicates uncontrollably without providing any useful feature, any useful work to the organism that it is a part of. As eventually, when enough of these cells, when these particular cells begin to dominate, the organism can no longer sustain life and it dies. They displace the cells that do work. They displace those, and they just destroy the organism itself. So within our society, we have a choice. We can either do useful work, or we can just uncontrollably reproduce while consuming energy which we do not produce nor contribute in its production. Therefore, eventually, the society itself has to die. And this goes back to religion itself, because it is the very notion of our individual responsibility, that we are responsible for ourselves, that we have a duty to God to behave a certain way that helps us mature, that helps us eventually become a producing member of society, that we carry the burden of society to a certain extent, that we fulfill our function. When we neglect that, and all we do is think of ourselves and consume and consume and consume without ever actually putting in work, without ever helping the society itself, we become a cancer to it. And the problem is exactly the same. So the body itself never addresses cancer because it sees cancer as part of itself. The body has soldiers in it. We call it immune system. These are basically soldiers, like protein soldier and cellular soldiers that fight any invader. But what they do not do is they do not attack cells which are viewed as the part of the body. Now, because cancer cells, they do not exhibit any foreign proteins, they are basically seen as the part of the body, except they are no longer, they still are the part of the body, but they are basically immature cells. The easiest way to describe cancer is that they are immature cells. All they do is consume, never produce, multiply, displace the cells that do produce. They put undue burden on the system, and the system can no longer compensate, so it dies. For people, when enough people choose to disobey God, they never mature. They stay these selfish, lying, self-serving, greedy people. When we talk about religion, when I talk about religion, I'm not talking about religion as it's known today to us. As these clubs we belong to, and you have the Western religion and Eastern religion, and you have these traditions and just bizarre beliefs in both. When you look at religion for what it truly is, and easiest examples are for what the Messiah Jesus brought, or what Prophet Muhammad brought. When you find their exact words, when you find sources that are reliable enough to where you can actually trust what is said, not the writings of priests, not the writings of people who came after them, but actually what they said, like the Quran in Islam, or some of the quotes that Prophet Jesus said that is quoted in the Synoptic Gospels. You see that the morality, there is a basis, a simple morality the Ten Commandments, the straight path in the Quran, all these things are defined, and they're all the same. So all religion is actually the same. What is different about them is our traditions. What is different about them is that we were indoctrinated into the traditions of our people, and we believe that that is religion, but that is not what God revealed. And most of us, unfortunately, don't really have the confidence to study these books for ourselves or the time. And so we have to go on by what we hear and what the priests teach us and so on, without realizing that priests themselves have been indoctrinated. You cannot be a priest unless you buy into this idea of what religion is, which, if you look at historically, is generally always enforced by violence. Somebody says this is the right thing, and now if you disagree, we're going to burn you at the stake or we're going to kill you. So this is what we inherited, and we have been indoctrinated into it, and we see it as religion, and we defend it because indoctrination is a very powerful thing. It's very hard for us to go against ideas of our ancestors, our parents. But the religions, as they have been passed on to us, are clearly wrong. They're clearly wrong. They have the components of true faith, but they are not highlighted like they're supposed to be highlighted. The only faith, the only thing, is obedience to God. The only religion acceptable to God is obedience to God. And what is the obedience? The Ten Commandments, the straight path in the Quran that's defined in the Quran. These are the same actions: humility, kindness, justice, morality, fairness to each other, shouldering your own burden. And this is what matures you as a cell in an organism we call society. This is what gives you maturity. This is what helps you overcome your selfishness and selfish desire to consume and just be for yourself. The charity that is commanded. All of these things are necessary for a healthy functioning of society. And the only way they can be enforced, they can't be enforced forever by force, because eventually, once enough cells become cancer cells, once enough of us become immature to where all we care about is ourselves, a society cannot function anymore. It cannot be sustained. The resources are drained. And even now in our own society here in America, we are $20 trillion in debt. The resources cannot go on indefinitely. We don't have enough to continue to do everything that we do. And the corruption is what's draining the resources. I'm not saying that only the people that don't produce are cancer. The people that consume more resources that are due to them, like, for example, in our society, the people on the rich end of our society who are basically starting wars and doing all these terrible things, they are also like a cancer cell. Their greed and their selfishness and their lack of empathy and morality is causing them to consume all of our resources and destroy the society. They are also these cells that do no purpose to sustain the organism. Our society is an organism. Our body is an organism. Each of us in a society, we are a cell, just like a cell in our organism. All of us have different skills, different knowledge. All of us carry a piece of a puzzle, which makes us all equal, except we don't like to view ourselves that way. Same thing in our bodies. Our bodies all are composed of cells, all of which do their purpose. While they do their purpose, we are healthy. Once something happens to the cells and they decide to just consume resources and never actually mature into a productive member of society, of the body, they will kill the body. And same thing happens in society. I don't know how to cure cancer, but I know how to cure society. We have to understand that obedience to God and the moral characteristics that God commands from us are the only thing that keeps societies working. The only thing. We cannot be foolish enough to think of ourselves as so civilized that we can overcome this obstacle by technology, or by money, or by whatever else we think. We cannot. There have been civilizations before us, great civilizations that have gone on for thousands of years, but they all collapsed, and they all collapsed for the same reason: the immorality of their inhabitants. Eventually, these things catch up to people, and chickens come home to roost. So it is very imperative, as members of society, for us to realize what God commanded and demand of each other that we behave that way and hold each other accountable. This is what our immune system should do to cancer cells. How to get it to do that, I don't know. But unless we mature as people individually, we are going to forever stay like the cancer cells, immature, consuming resources, and we will destroy where we live. So I just wanted to make this comparison because it is a clear comparison. We have to all individually decide not to be cancer onto our society, and hold those who are being a cancer onto our society responsible, and cure our own society. And the only way to do this is through God. The only way to do this is through obeying God. That's all.